It began with a photograph. In the summer of 1943, as Allied bombers returned from missions over occupied France, reconnaissance planes of the Royal Air Force's Photographic Reconnaissance Unit brought back a series of images that would ignite one of the most secret and consequential intelligence operations of the Second World War. Taken at extreme altitude by unarmed Spitfires, the photos revealed vast and unfamiliar construction sites scattered along the northern French coast. Sites that puzzled even the most seasoned analysts at RAF Medmenham, the Allies' top intelligence photo interpretation center. At first glance, they appeared to be storage depots or perhaps fortified bunkers, but the scale, the symmetry, and the strange rail-like structures suggested something else, something designed for launch. One site near the village of Watton in the Pas-de-Calais region drew particular attention. A massive, reinforced dome, nearly impenetrable from the air. Its purpose was a mystery, but its urgency was clear. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, briefed in secrecy, scribbled a single word in the margin of his intelligence report: urgent. The Allies had learned, through fragmentary intercepts and resistance reports, that Hitler had ordered the development of Vergeltungswaffen, weapons of vengeance. These weapons, he claimed, would reverse Germany's fortunes and bring the Allies to their knees. But what form would they take? No one yet knew. The Air Ministry's Scientific Intelligence Division, under the direction of Dr. R.V. Jones, began to piece together the puzzle. Jones was no ordinary scientist. Meticulous and quietly determined, he had already played a vital role in countering the German radio beam bombing system during the Blitz. Now, his attention turned to the growing whispers of pilotless aircraft and long-range rockets. He noted reports from resistance, contacts of strange pulse jet sounds near Peenemünde, a remote site on the Baltic Sea. Others described mysterious contrails streaking across the sky, vanishing into the clouds. Each fragment pointed toward a horrifying possibility. The Germans might be close to creating the world's first guided missile. But within the walls of Whitehall, opinions differed sharply. Some dismissed the idea as far-fetched, a product of enemy propaganda. Others feared it was already too late. "We cannot afford to gamble with this," Churchill warned during a July cabinet meeting. "If they have found a new means to strike our cities, we must find it and destroy it before it strikes us." Meanwhile, reconnaissance flights intensified. The pilots, men like Flight Lieutenant Tony Hill, flew unarmed and alone, skimming over occupied territory at great risk to capture clearer images of the mysterious sites. Their cameras, not bombs, were their weapons. On August 12th, Hill's Spitfire returned with the clearest photographs yet. What the analysts saw confirmed their worst fears. At Peenemünde, engineers were building a rocket far larger than anything seen before, an engine capable of crossing the English Channel in minutes. The discovery sent shockwaves through the Allied command. The scientific plausibility was staggering. A weapon that could fly faster than sound, undetectable until impact. Dr. Jones summarized the situation bluntly in his report. "If these rockets are completed, they may fall upon London without warning." The project, he concluded, was codenamed V2. But even as intelligence mounted, questions remained. How close were the Germans to launching these weapons? How many sites were operational? And could the Allies reach them in time? Across the Channel, life in London continued under the shadow of the Blitz's memory. The thought of a new, unstoppable weapon terrified the public, though few yet knew of its existence. In the war rooms beneath the Admiralty, however, the tone was different. This was not merely a defensive concern, it was a race. One fought not on open battlefields, but in laboratories, radar rooms, and secret bases. One intelligence officer described the atmosphere succinctly. "It was like chasing a ghost. Every time we thought we'd found the heart of the program, it slipped deeper underground." The Allies needed more than photographs. They needed confirmation. Human intelligence, eyes on the ground, and perhaps sabotage from within occupied Europe. By September, codenames began circulating. Operation Crossbow, the Allied plan to identify, disrupt, and destroy Germany's secret weapon program before it could reach Britain's shores. For now, however, the mission existed only on paper, shrouded in secrecy and uncertainty. As the last light faded over the Channel that autumn, the question lingered among Britain's highest command. What exactly was being built along the coast of Europe? and how soon before it was unleashed upon them. The photos offered only fragments. The truth lay hundreds of miles away, hidden beneath concrete and secrecy. And soon, the Allies would risk everything to uncover it. By late 1943, the mystery had deepened. Intercepted German communications, decrypted by the brilliant minds at Bletchley Park, began to confirm what the reconnaissance photographs had hinted at. The Nazis were developing advanced long-range weapons capable of reaching London from launch sites in occupied Europe. These weren't rumors anymore. Operation Crossbow was officially born, its objective clear: uncover and destroy Hitler's secret weapons before they could be unleashed. Within the walls of the Air Ministry's Scientific Intelligence Division, Dr. R.V. Jones and his analysts worked around the clock, poring over fragments of evidence. Intercepted messages mentioned Wehrgeltungswaffen, weapons of revenge. Resistance agents in France spoke of massive tunnels, fuel depots, and slave laborers working under brutal conditions. The French underground risked their lives to sketch site layouts, smuggle out blueprints, and radio-coded messages to London. But the intelligence was fragmented, riddled with uncertainty. For every confirmed site, 2 others vanished under camouflage or misdirection. At Medmenham, the photo interpreters worked in total silence, under fluorescent light that never dimmed. Using stereoscopic viewers, they studied aerial photos with near-surgical precision. Tiny shadows, tire tracks, and rail lines became vital clues. One young analyst, Constance Babington Smith, noticed an anomaly in one photograph: a strange, ramp-like structure near Peenemünde. It looked nothing like an airfield, bunker, or radar site. Her observation would later prove pivotal. She had just identified one of the first V-1 launch ramps. But the task facing the Allies was monumental. The Nazi war machine was operating under the utmost secrecy, burying factories deep underground, concealing launch sites beneath forests, and building dummy facilities to mislead bombers. The Germans were masters of deception, and the Allies were racing against time. Every day we delayed, Jones later recalled, was another day for them to advance their terror weapons. To piece the puzzle together, the Allies turned to their most daring resource, the Special Operations Executive, or SOE. Behind enemy lines, agents parachuted into occupied France, Belgium, and Holland to verify the existence of these mysterious sites. Many never returned. Among them was Wing Commander Yeo Thomas, codenamed the White Rabbit, who coordinated sabotage efforts through the French resistance. His reports confirmed enormous underground bunkers under construction at Watten, Wizernes, and Epelec, later identified as V-weapon launch facilities. Meanwhile, inside Germany, a different kind of struggle unfolded. At Peenemünde, on the Baltic coast, Werner von Braun and General Walter Dornberger oversaw thousands of engineers and forced laborers working to perfect the V-2 rocket. It was the culmination of years of research, a supersonic missile capable of carrying a 1-ton warhead over 200 miles. Hitler saw it as a miracle weapon, one that would turn the tide of the war. In his private notes, he wrote, "London must be wiped from the map. These weapons will bring them to their knees." Back in Britain, Churchill's war cabinet wrestled with the dilemma of how to strike back. Peenemünde lay far beyond the range of most tactical bombers, and its defences were formidable. But in August 1943, the RAF devised an audacious plan, a massive night raid that would target not only the test sites, but also the living quarters of key scientists and engineers. The operation was codenamed Hydra. Before the raid, bomber command crews were briefed in strict secrecy. "You are to hit the source of the enemy's most secret weapon," they were told. The success of this operation may determine the future of London itself. It was a chilling reminder of the stakes. On the night of August 17th and 1943, nearly 600 bombers lifted off from British airfields. The raid would last barely an hour, but would alter the course of the war. RAF Pathfinders dropped flares to mark targets along the Baltic coast, and waves of Lancasters followed, unleashing over 1,800 tons of explosives. Fires engulfed the Peenemünde complex. The attack destroyed much of the rocket research area and killed several senior engineers, including Dr. Walter Thiel, a key figure in propulsion design. Yet the cost was immense: 40 aircraft lost, 215 airmen killed, and still, the impact on German production was uncertain. Within weeks, reports indicated that the program had simply moved. Von Braun and Dornberger, relocated operations to secret underground facilities in central Germany, beyond the reach of Allied bombers. The weapons project had survived, buried deeper than ever. Operation Crossbow's leaders faced a grim reality. Despite the raid's apparent success, Hitler's secret weapon program lived on, concealed, dispersed, and even harder to find. The enemy's innovation was as relentless as its cruelty. As Allied analysts sifted through post-raid reconnaissance photos, one troubling question hung in the air. Had they truly stopped the threat, or merely forced it into the shadows? In the quiet halls of Medmenham, Dr. Jones studied the latest photos and wrote a single note in his log. The snake has gone to ground. We must find it before it strikes again. At first light over the Baltic Sea, the winds carried smoke and silence. Peenemünde lay in ruins. Yet beneath the rubble, the heart of Hitler's secret weapon program continued to beat. Operation Hydra had struck hard, but it had not destroyed the German dream of vengeance. In the aftermath, Allied analysts pored over the damage assessments and found something unsettling. While the surface facilities were crippled, much of the design data, key personnel, and prototype rockets had survived. Within weeks, German engineers had already begun relocating operations south, away from the reach of British bombers. The new site would be the Harz Mountains of central Germany, specifically the underground tunnels of a former gypsum mine near Nordhausen. Its new name, Mittelwerk. The Germans had learned a brutal lesson from Peenemünde. Nothing above ground was safe. Under SS supervision, the rocket program went underground, literally. Tens of thousands of slave laborers, primarily from the Dora Mittelbau concentration camp, were forced to carve vast tunnels into the mountain. The air was thick with dust, disease, and death. Prisoners worked 16-hour shifts in pitch-black conditions, assembling rocket parts by hand. Thousands perished before the first V2 ever launched. While these horrors unfolded in secrecy, British and American intelligence raced to understand the scale of what had survived. Reconnaissance flights over the region were scarce. Heavy cloud cover and thick camouflage made Mittelwerk invisible to the eye. Even so, Allied analysts knew the program had not died. Evidence from captured documents, decoded Enigma messages, and French resistance sources painted a grim picture. The Germans were not only rebuilding, but accelerating production. In a single chilling report, one line stood out: mass production to begin autumn 1944. Dr. R.V. Jones, the architect of Operation Crossbow, understood what that meant. The Allies were running out of time. Meanwhile, test launches continued on the Baltic coast. Witnesses in Sweden and Denmark reported eerie streaks of light arcing through the night sky, followed seconds later by distant thunder. These were the first V2 test firings, reaching speeds of over 3,500 miles per hour. The missile, 14 meters long, carried a 1-ton explosive warhead and climbed 50 miles into the stratosphere before plunging down on its target faster than sound. It was, in every sense, a weapon ahead of its time. Too fast to intercept, too destructive to ignore. In London, debates erupted across Churchill's war cabinet and the Allied High Command. Some argued that continued bombing of suspected sites in France was the only way to delay deployment. Others believed the key lay in intelligence, finding Mittelwerk and cutting off its lifeline before the rockets could be launched. The Americans too grew increasingly involved. The newly formed US 8th Air Force, based in East Anglia, began joint operations with the RAF to target potential launch bases along the French coast. Operation Crossbow had now become an international effort, but uncertainty clouded every decision. Many bombing runs struck empty fields or dummy sites, meticulously built by the Germans to deceive reconnaissance. In one intercepted message, the Germans even mocked Allied efforts, referring to the English habit of bombing the same forest twice. Yet the stakes were too high for hesitation. Every hour lost could mean another weapon nearing completion. One of the most haunting intelligence reports came from the Polish underground. Couriers risked their lives to transport fragments of a crashed V2 rocket, recovered from a test range in occupied Poland, across Europe. The parts eventually reached Britain in August 1944, confirming the missile's terrifying capabilities. For the first time, Allied scientists could see the weapon they were fighting to stop. It was unlike anything the world had ever built, one engineer remarked. It was as if the future had fallen into the wrong hands. Meanwhile, at Peenemünde, Werner von Braun continued to walk a delicate line between loyalty to the Reich and his own scientific ambitions. He knew the war was turning against Germany, yet his rockets represented both hope and doom. In one private conversation, later recounted by colleagues, he admitted, "We wanted to reach the stars. Instead, we built a weapon to destroy our own humanity." As 1944 approached, the Allies began noticing new patterns. Supply convoys moving from Germany toward the Pas-de-Calais, increased fuel storage near coastal bunkers, and intensified Luftwaffe patrols in northern France. Something was coming, something big. And then the reports began to trickle in. Strange pulsating engine noises over the channel. Objects seen streaking across the night sky at incredible speeds. Bomb impacts without any warning sirens. Londoners began to whisper of ghost bombs. Weapons that arrived in silence, exploding without any defense. The V1 flying bomb had arrived. The V2 would soon follow. Operation Crossbow's mission was about to enter its most desperate phase. The Allies had identified the weapon. Now they had to stop it from reaching the skies. But as the bombs began to fall, one question haunted the Allied command. Had they truly understood the scale of what they were facing, or had they only seen the beginning of Hitler's vengeance? The night sky over northern France burned with fire. On August 17, 1943, as the last bombers of Operation Hydra returned from their strike on Peenemünde, the Allies believed they had dealt a decisive blow to Hitler's secret weapon program. Yet deep beneath the ruins, the Nazi regime was already adapting, moving its research, its people, and its production facilities underground. The shadow war for control of the V-weapons was only beginning. Within weeks of the Peenemünde raid, aerial reconnaissance detected renewed construction. But this time, not on the Baltic coast. The sites were appearing across northern France. Watten, Wisserness, Epelec, Siracourt. Massive, concrete-reinforced fortresses were rising from the countryside, some covered in camouflage nets and fake farmhouses. Locals whispered of slave laborers working around the clock, guarded by SS troops. To the untrained eye, they were simply bunkers, but to the analysts at Medmenham, they were something far more ominous. Launch facilities for Hitler's new vengeance weapons. In September, a young RAF photo interpreter, reviewing images of a half-completed dome near Wisserness, noted an extraordinary detail, an enormous arched tunnel leading directly toward a nearby railway line. This was no ordinary storage bunker. Intelligence quickly concluded that the site, nicknamed La Coupole, was designed to house, fuel, and launch V2 rockets at London and Antwerp. Its roof alone was over 5 meters thick, enough to withstand almost any Allied bomb. Churchill was briefed immediately. "We must crush these monsters before they hatch," he said grimly. Orders were sent to Bomber Command. The new sites were to be obliterated no matter the cost. The bombing campaign that followed became one of the most relentless of the war. Day after day, squadrons of B-17 flying fortresses from the US 8th Air Force and Lancaster bombers from the RAF pounded northern France. The raids targeted Watten, Siracourt, Mimoyekes, anywhere intelligence suggested rocket activity. Operation Crossbow was now in full motion, but the results were mixed. The bunker's reinforced structures absorbed extraordinary punishment. Bombs cratered the countryside, yet many of the key facilities remained intact. It was like trying to dig out a hornet's nest with a shovel, one pilot recalled. In some cases, the sites were hit repeatedly for weeks, only to be found operational again later. The Germans were masters of deception, erecting false scaffolding, painting over damage, and diverting attention to decoy structures. Inside the bunkers, however, chaos reigned. The constant bombing forced the SS to halt construction repeatedly. Thousands of forced laborers were killed as ceilings collapsed and machinery shattered. German engineers, unable to maintain steady production, began moving critical components by train into Germany. The V-weapons program, though bloodied, endured. In London, the atmosphere grew tense. The War Cabinet debated whether the bombing was worth the enormous cost in aircraft and men. Some military advisors urged shifting focus to the upcoming D-Day preparations instead. Yet Churchill, haunted by the thought of an unstoppable missile raining destruction on British cities, refused to relent. "If these rockets fall upon us," he warned, "history will not forgive us for having spared them." Amid the bombing campaign, intelligence officers continued to chase fragments of information, resistance networks in France, particularly the heroic Réseau Alliance, relayed coordinates of construction sites and rail shipments. Many of these reports were smuggled out through neutral Switzerland, where Allied attachés verified them before passing them on to London. Each report could mean life or death for an entire squadron. Then, in early 1944, something changed. Reconnaissance pilots flying over Peenemünde noticed unusual stillness. The test stands were abandoned, but further south, beyond the Harz Mountains, new activity appeared. Rail lines converging into mountainsides, supply trains arriving under heavy guard. The heart of the V2 program had moved entirely underground, into Mittelwerk. It was now completely hidden from the sky. The realization struck Allied command like a thunderclap. The bombing of France could slow the launches, but the true manufacturing source lay buried deep within Germany, far beyond their immediate reach. "We were fighting smoke," an intelligence officer later wrote. "We could destroy the launches, but not the weapon itself." Still, Operation Crossbow continued with relentless urgency. In March 1944, new high-speed cameras captured a moment of terrifying clarity, a blurred image of a V1 flying bomb on a launch ramp moments before takeoff. The Allies had found one of their targets in action and confirmed their fears that the Germans were nearly operational. As the campaign intensified, so did the mystery. Entire sites disappeared between reconnaissance flights. Rail lines shifted direction overnight. It was as if the landscape itself was conspiring to hide Germany's secret. Many in Allied command began to wonder whether they were being misled by the enemy, or whether something even more elaborate was unfolding behind those walls of concrete and secrecy. By the spring of 1944, with the invasion of Normandy only months away, the stakes could not have been higher. The Allies had to cripple the V-weapon threat before their armies landed in Europe. The next phase of Operation Crossbow would not only test their technology and tactics, it would test their courage, resolve, and faith in the intelligence guiding them. Because the next time these weapons were seen, they wouldn't be on the ground, they would be in the sky and falling toward London. At dawn on June 13, 1944, a strange buzzing filled the skies over the English Channel. People in Kent looked up to see what appeared to be a small aircraft with no pilot, leaving behind a sputtering flame. Moments later, its engine cut out, and seconds after that, an explosion tore through the streets of London. This was the first V1 flying bomb to strike Britain. The age of Hitler's vengeance weapons had begun. The V1, or Fieseler F-103, was a pulse jet-powered missile capable of traveling nearly 400 miles per hour. Crude but effective, it carried an 850-kilogram warhead. The British quickly nicknamed it the Buzz Bomb, or Doodlebug, for its distinct staccato drone. Within weeks, hundreds of V1s were being launched daily from sites in northern France, targeting London, Southampton, and Antwerp. The attacks caused chaos, not because of their accuracy, but because of their relentlessness. For the Allies, the nightmare they had feared since 1943 had become reality. Operation Crossbow, initially a secret intelligence mission, transformed overnight into a desperate defensive campaign. Radar stations, anti-aircraft batteries, and squadrons of fighters scrambled to intercept the incoming weapons. "You could hear them coming," recalled one Londoner, "and you prayed the sound wouldn't stop, because when it stopped, that meant it was about to hit." Behind the noise and panic, British intelligence raced to find the launch sites. Aerial reconnaissance identified dozens of ski sites hidden in the forests of Pas-de-Calais and Normandy, long concrete ramps designed to hurl the V1s into the sky. These were the primary targets of Crossbow's new phase. Allied bombers struck them day after day in a massive, coordinated effort that stretched from May to August 1944. The 2nd Tactical Air Force and the US 9th Air Force flew hundreds of sorties. Each mission was dangerous. The sites were heavily defended by flak batteries and surrounded by decoy targets. Pilots flew through clouds of shrapnel to drop their payloads with pinpoint precision. The Allies also deployed new 12,000-pound tallboy bombs, designed by engineer Barnes Wallis, capable of penetrating reinforced concrete. When one of these monstrous bombs hit a V-weapon bunker, the explosion was catastrophic. Even with these relentless raids, the Germans adapted. Mobile launchers replaced fixed ramps, hidden along forest roads and rail spurs. These could be moved overnight, fired, and then abandoned before Allied aircraft arrived. "They were like ghosts," one pilot later recalled. "You destroy one site and find another operating the next morning." Meanwhile, London burned. By mid-July, more than 2,000 V1s had struck the city, killing thousands and injuring tens of thousands more. The Allies responded with new defensive tactics. RAF Tempest and Mosquito fighters were assigned to intercept incoming V-1s over the Channel. It became one of the most dangerous aerial duels of the war. Pilots had to fly faster than 400 mm, close in from behind, and tip the V-1's wing with their own to send it off course. It was like playing chicken with a bomb, said Flight Lieutenant Ken Collier. If you misjudged it, you didn't get a second try. Anti-aircraft guns were moved to the coast and reconfigured with new radar-guided systems. The effectiveness improved dramatically. By August 1944, up to 70% of incoming V-1s were being destroyed before reaching their targets. The tide was turning, but at terrible cost. Then came the second wave. In September 1944, reports reached Allied command of explosions in London with no warning, no engine noise, and no radar detection. Entire buildings vanished in an instant. The new terror had arrived, the V-2 rocket. Traveling at supersonic speeds, it descended faster than sound, striking before anyone could even hear it. Unlike the V-1, there was no defense, no interception, no escape. The V-2 was the culmination of the work that had begun at Peenemünde years earlier. Each launch site in Northern Europe became a race against Allied bombers and advancing ground forces. The British and Americans poured resources into locating these mobile rocket units. Resistance fighters provided grid coordinates of transport convoys and hidden storage tunnels, often relaying information just hours before the launches occurred. Their work saved lives, but the danger was constant. Dozens of agents were captured and executed by the Gestapo during these final months. The stakes grew higher after D-Day. As Allied armies advanced through Normandy and liberated northern France, they overran dozens of unfinished or abandoned launch sites. What they found was both horrifying and awe-inspiring. Concrete domes meters thick, fuel tanks the size of buildings, and blueprints for missiles unlike anything seen before. Many sites were still stocked with parts and incomplete rockets, hastily left behind by retreating German crews. In the midst of this chaos, one question haunted Allied command. How had Germany managed to build such weapons under constant bombardment? The answer was found later in the mountains of Thuringia, in a place called Mittelwerk, where forced laborers had assembled the rockets in unimaginable conditions. By the time the last V-1 was launched in March 1945, nearly 10,000 had been fired at Britain. Thousands of civilians were dead, tens of thousands wounded, and much of London lay in ruins once again. Yet, Operation Crossbow had achieved something vital. It had forced the Germans to divert enormous resources, delayed full-scale deployment, and prevented far greater devastation. Still, as Allied soldiers moved closer to Germany, new intelligence reports suggested that deeper within the Reich, even more advanced prototypes existed. Jet bombers, long-range missiles, perhaps even weapons capable of crossing the Atlantic. Whether these were real or illusions of desperation remained unclear, and so, as the Allies prepared to strike into the heart of Germany, Operation Crossbow entered its final, most perilous chapter, uncovering what remained of Hitler's secret arsenal before the war ended and before it vanished forever. By the spring of 1945, the war in Europe was collapsing. But the hunt for Hitler's secret weapons was only intensifying. As Allied troops pushed deep into Germany, reports from captured officers and intercepted communications hinted at a last desperate plan. The Nazis were attempting to move their V-2 production and research teams south, away from the advancing front. Their destination, Bavaria and Austria, where hidden laboratories and underground facilities might continue the work that had begun years earlier on the Baltic coast. For the men of Operation Crossbow, the race to find these sites before they disappeared became an urgent mission unlike any other. The liberation of northern France had already revealed the scale of the V-weapon network. Massive concrete fortresses like Watten and Wissenes stood silent and shattered, their purpose now undeniable. But in Germany, the Allies found something far worse: Mittelwerk. When the US Army's 104th Infantry Division entered the Harz Mountains in April 1945, they discovered the underground tunnels where thousands of V-2 rockets had been assembled by forced laborers under SS Guard. The conditions defied belief. Hundreds of bodies lay where they had fallen, starved or beaten to death. It was a factory of death as much as a factory of weapons, recalled one American officer. The survivors were living skeletons, their faces hollow with exhaustion and horror. Allied engineers moving through the tunnels found entire production lines still intact. rocket parts stacked in rows, and plans for new variants that had never reached the launch pads. At one tunnel entrance, painted in fading German script, were the words Mittelwerk GmbH. The world would later learn it had been the center of Hitler's missile program and the birthplace of modern rocket technology. As the Allies uncovered more of these sites, they realized just how close the Germans had come to achieving something unthinkable. Intelligence reports from the US Army's Technical Intelligence Service confirmed that Germany had been developing an intercontinental missile, the A9-A10, designed to reach New York. Other projects hinted at America bombers, jet-powered aircraft capable of crossing the Atlantic. The ambitions were vast, but the war had ended just in time to stop them. Among the captured engineers was Werner von Braun, the brilliant yet controversial architect of the V2. He and his team surrendered to the US Army in May 1945, seeking protection from Soviet capture. Von Braun famously told his American captors, "We wanted to reach the stars, but we were too busy trying to hit London." Operation Crossbow's intelligence officers quickly recognized the scientific value of these men and the geopolitical implications of their knowledge. Within months, many would be quietly transported to America under the secret program later known as Operation Paperclip. For the men and women who had fought to uncover and destroy Hitler's secret weapons, the war's end brought both relief and haunting reflection. The ruins of Peenemünde, Mittelwerk, and the coastal bunkers stood as silent testaments to the cost of progress under tyranny. In total, more than 3,000 V2 rockets had been launched against Britain, Belgium, and France, killing over 9,000 civilians. But tens of thousands more had died building them. Dr. R.V. Jones, whose intelligence work had guided Operation Crossbow from the beginning, later reflected, "The tragedy was not only in the weapon itself, but in the minds that conceived it. In their quest for power, they opened the door to the future, one we could never fully close again." In post-war Europe, rumors lingered. Soviet intelligence teams were said to have seized entire rocket production units and transported them east. Peenemunde's remains were stripped clean within weeks of occupation. Some German scientists vanished entirely, their names appearing years later in documents from Moscow or Washington. The technological secrets of the Third Reich were being divided among the victors, piece by piece. Yet beneath the politics and secrecy, one undeniable truth remained. Operation Crossbow had changed the nature of warfare. It had proven that intelligence, not just firepower, could alter the course of history. Through code-breaking, reconnaissance, and the courage of resistance fighters, the Allies had delayed Germany's vengeance long enough to save countless lives and to win the war before the V weapons could evolve further. As the war ended, Peenemünde itself fell silent, its test stands scorched and broken. The Baltic winds howled across the ruins where the future had been born in fire. The once secret project that had promised Hitler's revenge had instead become a warning to the world of how close humanity had come to self-destruction. In the years that followed, the technology forged in those tunnels would be reborn in the Cold War's missile races, in nuclear deterrence, and ultimately in the rockets that carried mankind into space. From Peenemünde to Cape Canaveral, the line was unmistakable. But the shadow of Operation Crossbow remained. The photographs, the bombed-out domes, the vanished engineers. They all told a story not just of war, but of obsession, secrecy, and the thin line between genius and madness. And somewhere, in the silent wreckage of a tunnel beneath the Harz Mountains, history's first rocket factory still waits in the dark, a relic of a time when the world's deadliest secrets were hidden in plain sight, and when the race for the future began amid the ashes of war.